Well, Shabbat Shalom. It's not really Sabbath, but we wanted to just say that because we will not be here on Sabbath. So you can just kind of use this recording, if you would, as your Shabbat study, or just read along with this. There's some things we want to talk about here. I'm excited. I tell you, anytime I'm talking to Papa B prior to Torah Talks, there's just a lot of good information that's shared with me. But this is Torah Talks with Tony and Bill. Again, I'm Tony, and this is Bill. Some of you guys know him as Rabbi Son. I know him as Papa B. And we're wanting to talk to you and hopefully get to these areas of operation today. But before we do that, we realize that every year we go through these times where we are allowed to be with our family and friends. And it's such a precious moment. It's an opportunity to really love on your family, to hear where they've been, and to communicate with them about some of the places you've been and the experiences you're having. And it's just a good time to be with your family. Years ago, and I'll let Papa B speak to this a little bit. So years ago, we would come here, and when these seasons would roll around, Papa B would come out and he would share with us. Now, guys, I know that we're entering into a time where you're going to be with your families, and he used to give us it sound like a warning. It would say, I want you to be careful about what you say, what you do. Remember that you're there to really love on your family. You're not there to argue politics. You're not there to win them over to some theory or some idea. You're there to really love on them. You're there to be present and to be with them. And sometimes the temptation to get into negative things that are going to have a negative impact on their lives, and things that are going to change that whole environment. The temptation to do that sometimes is great because we go there, and that's why I hope this will be the segue into this areas of operation. We go there sometimes with flesh hanging out, and influenced by flesh, and so we go there and something is said, a trigger takes place, and then we're talking and we're interacting, and before you know it, that environment is contaminated. Probably, can you encourage us as we go into this season?
Thank you, Tony. I wish to do this. It's very much on my heart. It's very much a part of our ambassadorial function on behalf of the kingdom of heaven in general. Look, we have been given this beautiful gift of speech. No other creature on earth has cognitive thought processes plus the ability to push air over our vocal cords in such a way as to release blessings upon the earth, to make words come forth that are like our Creator's words, and actually begin to send forth vibrations into the earth that can heal, restore, redeem, or unfortunately wound, injure, cause anxiety, trigger old scars, and trigger even mental illness and emotional and spiritual disease, symptomology. I mean, this mouth, this thing that we have. I was talking to Tony earlier about how during our get ready about I think it was one of the old John Wayne movies, and his job was to haul a whole load of nitroglycerin in a horse and buggy, or a wagon, actually a wagon across the rugged terrain of the West, and not blow himself up or blow anybody else up, or create a crater in the earth where he wasn't too careful with what he did, wasn't careful enough with what he did with this wagon load of nitroglycerin. Well, our words are like a wagon load of nitroglycerin. We have to be really careful with it. Now, one thing about when we're dealing with family and on holidays, this is the week of the Thanksgiving holiday in America, and then we'll eventually phase on into the later holidays, from Hanukkah, from the standpoint we look at, to Christmas, the way other folks look at in this process. And these are times when families will get together. Now, one thing about interacting specifically with family members is that we may tend to want to jump into there and take a radical approach to our faith and to our knowledge of sin patterns in their lives, or disagreements about theology or politics or ideology, into these dinners, enter these social times, these times of gathering. Well, that's the nitroglycerin wagon jostling really heavily, because the thing about family is going to be here when all of our issues and our conversations about theology end. The question is it going to be healthy? Is it going to be something beautiful? And one thing that the covenant calls us to is to have lovely tents. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your tabernacles, Israel. And so the question is, we need to make sure that whenever we go into our family gatherings, that we have a mindset of, I want to make this as beautiful a tent as I possibly can. And I can do this or not do this through the power of the words that I use. If I feel like I have to go in and confront every sin in my family members' lives, or every what we may believe is a wrong doctrine or a wrong approach or a wrong attitude, then we're going to make some messes in our tents. We're going to have some ugly tents. And the key factor here is to understand you're carrying this precious gift of speech. And you're going to be in family a long time, so take your time. You don't have to push every button. You really don't. As a matter of fact, the less buttons you push, the more you release yourself as being a calming influence, a peaceful influence, a influence of shalom. The more you will actually have a chance and some level of weight when you actually do get a chance to one-on-one, hopefully, have a conversation that they bring up about the issues, and then stay calm and not again be the pontificator, the preacher. What you don't want to do is activate people. What you don't want to do is alienate your family members. And it's more important that you let things pass. Obviously, don't let your children get hurt, or don't let yourself get wounded, or your wife or your spouse get wounded in this process. But be willing to put up a little thing, and be willing to say the purpose we're here is to build family, not destroy it. So that helps.
You know, when we first started talking about this mass circumcision, one of the things we talked about, or actually prior to that, we were leading into this with just our process, being around each other. What I remember about our process in your home, Marvell, the church, is how aware we were, how cognizant we were of each other. Yeah. You know, we were always greeted with, how are you doing? How's your family? Right. We knew each other's families, right, and we knew different dynamics that were going on in the families. And so we were genuinely concerned about the families. And I remember that. I remember a lot of the words that were spoken over my household, over my children, over myself and my wife. It was from people who genuinely cared about us. We were present in each other's home and each other's family. And those were some of the moments I remember at the house, is that we were surrounded by people who cared, and you knew it. And so, and we weren't talking about circumcision and things like that then. We were just genuinely loving on each other. And so, you know, those are the type of moments that we cherish, and that's what we want to bring into our families when we're with them, when we're sitting and we're eating and we're talking and we're laughing. We want to be present. We want to genuinely care. We're not asking anybody to put on a false face or anything like that, but because of who we are, you know, and because of him that lives in us, right? We have that ability. We have the capacity to really love people and to genuinely be there. So one of the things that I learned early on as a preacher is you can't force people to do anything, right? You love those people, and that love itself, when it's displayed appropriately, that love has a drawing force to it. It has a guiding force to it. And you let love talk. You let love walk and talk and be there for other people. But love responds to love. We love him because he first loved us, right? And so I would encourage you to just really be present this year with your family, and just really be a lover of your family.
Well, and in that regard, before we go on to the meat of the substance of what we're going to talk about today, I just want to add one thing: is there's certain things we do need to take off before we go, and this may hurt some people's psyches to say this, but we need to take off sarcasm in these family gatherings, in particular. The old ways of doing things, the ways of joke, even when it's joking, sometimes it's not received as a joke by the other party, and there's just no purpose. It doesn't serve any valuable purpose. So sarcasm, cynicism, accusation, blame, these are things that we need to take out from around our tongue and around our mind, and be cognizant, be thinking. Does this sound sarcastic? I don't mean to put tremors into you, or Trevor what into you. I don't want you to be afraid, but I do want you to say, okay, before I open my mouth, am I being sarcastic? Am I falling into an old behavior pattern that was not healthy and not helpful? And can I do things without using the sarcasm, without using cynicism, without using accusation, without getting into argumentative areas? Then we can do some great things. We can talk about family and where we are. And one thing about, our families, whenever we were growing up together, our families grew up together, and we grew up together in a lot of different ways. And this process of seeing this develop, we genuinely cared about how we were doing, not about the ways we did or didn't agree on some theological issue or some political issue or some other issue that might be out there. In the process, the concern and the care about the individuals and the families outweighed and it trumped all those other things. And so I just encourage you to know certain things need to be taken off, and then the most important thing is put back on this bond of love.
Yes. So definitely this is a segue then, because one of the things that we talk about when you was talking about Mul and Orla, when you were breaking that down the last time, this is what you were saying. This whole cutting away, this pulling back. One of the things that in the summary version of this, you said cutting away of excess flesh. And I remember my daughter was at work and she looked at the post, and that was something that stood out to her, is cutting away the excess flesh, which is really what you're talking about now, because we go into these experiences with flesh influencing our thought patterns, influencing the way we're going to behave within these circles and the way we're going to react. And sometimes we run, it becomes our city of refuge is to go to sarcasm, right? That's our city of refuge. That's the place we hide. That's our defense mechanism. And so we want to take off these things. We want to cut away these things, and that's what self-denial is. It's allowing those things to be peeled back and cut away. One of the things that I wanted to get into, and so finally we'll touch it, we'll see how far we can get with this, is when you started talking about this circumcision, you and I, you brought this forward. And the first thing I noticed was, I think it was about 9 areas that you had, areas of operation, places that we were going to need to surrender to this process of circumcision. The first one you have here are the ears. I thought that was interesting. So you have the ears, and I want you to try to get at least a couple of these touched, so that the families going into this holiday season, I want them to understand how important it is and how impactful it could be if we actually surrendered ourselves in these areas for operation.
Let me start with that, and I'll kind of get a general statement about this excess flesh process, because it is in the areas of the excess flesh that we need to have the circumcision of the ears. And so, how do you reckon it? How do you know if you're operating in excess flesh? What are the telltale signs that there's excess flesh in your ears or your other things that we're going to talk about? Well, the first thing is sensitivity. If you are sensitive about what you hear, about what other people say, if you have this reaction in your emotions to the fact that people are saying something, your ears need to be circumcised. They need to be cut away, because that extra flesh is what's sensitive. It's not your spirit being sensitive and oversensitive and offended by the things that you hear with your ears. I mean, listen, pay attention. to how your body reacts whenever you hear something that is disagreeable to you, or that it seems to be different than your thought processes. So sensitivity is the first thing. Notice if you're sensitive, and ask the Lord. Have these conversations with the Father. Father, I need to be circumcised in my ears where I won't be so sensitive when my cousin Susie or Jim says these things to me, or when we start, the subject matter turns around to, whatever it is we don't want to talk about. I mean, not my ears not be so sensitive. Second thing is not just sensitivity, but then sensuousness, a sense that we want to be tickled. Not only do we want to not be, the ears particularly, the ears, we sensitive, we get offended, we get hurt. The other thing about sensuality is we want to hear them say certain things. We want to hear them agree with us. We want to hear them in some way flatter us. Say, I'm using the sensitive of the ears which are uncircumcised love to be coddled to, modeled to, and they almost need that. It's like, if I don't hear that, I don't feel like I'm loved. If you didn't tell me how beautiful my dress is today, or my jacket is today, or how intelligent I sound today, then something's wrong. And there's that issue of sensuality, hungering for something to be said in that regard. The next issue is sentimentality, and that's the other sign, and the third of the four signs. I got 4 S's here that I try to use to remember. The sentimentality aspect of things, particularly as we're using the ears as our first example here, is that certain things just set off a nice warm buzz in us. It's old familiar things that we just tell. You get around family, sometimes you tell the same old stories and you laugh and you feel warm and fuzzy. Or you watch a football game and your favorite team's on, and you talk about the back in this, 1994 when so-and-so won the championship, and everybody feels warm and fuzzy. Understand that that's flesh, and while you can enjoy it a little bit, be careful letting yourself rest there too long. Some that needs to be trimmed back to the stand, because we'll never go forward. We'll never move anywhere, and the kingdom of heaven is always moving forward, forcefully advancing, unless our flesh is holding it back. So there's that whole issue of the sentimentality. And then the fourth thing is susceptibility. We have triggers in our ears. We hear certain things and we go off. It's almost like a conditioned response, a Pavlov's dog. The bell rings, we salivate, because the food there. We begin to be susceptible to manipulation by virtue of certain things that we hear or in that process with our ears. Understand, our ears are supposed to be ears that hear. Yeshua kept saying, he that has ears to hear. Well, the Hebrew would actually be Shema. Ears that begin to vibrate in tune, like a tuning fork, to the same pitch, to the same melody, to the same frequency of that sound that's in heaven. There's a big reason for that, because that's the kingdom. We're supposed to bring and reproduce on earth the sounds of what's going on in heaven. If we're caught in this excess flesh realm of what we're hearing among the people and responding to what we're hearing among the folks, guess what we can't do? We can't shema the vibrations of the sounds of heaven. This is one of those issues that we could move off of the standpoint of family gatherings to the issue of worship now. You've been around them. I've been around it. We've enjoyed some of it. Good singing, good songs, we like to hear the old familiar songs. I know, some people like the hymns, some people like the choruses, some people like just sounds and melodies and beats and whatever. That gets to be familiar to us. And we get used to it and we like it. Now here's the story. Is it what's happening in heaven? Because the only thing in worship is supposed to be about reproducing on earth what the angels and the cherubim and the seraphim and the living creatures and the elders are saying, and of course the ones who sits on the throne is saying, and the sounds that are coming from heaven, because that's what we're supposed to be releasing upon the earth. So if we understand these issues of how the ears need to be circumcised, and it is a process of continually, like the fingernails we talked about last week, continually it keeps growing back. And so we get sensuous again, and we get sentimental again, and we get susceptible again. So we have to keep trimming back, or actually, we don't do it. We have to surrender those ears, lay them. It's kind of like, one of the telltale signs of the Hebrew servant, if he wanted to stay in the employment of the master, and He surrendered his ear to the master and let him actually pierce that ear. It's a circumcision of the ear. And I'm not talking for the people who might be literalists out there about physically doing that. That's between you and the Father. I'm not going to get in there. But what I am saying is the idea of surrendering this ear to the Father is the critical aspect here, because if you can't surrender the ear, you probably won't surrender the tongue, which is the next phase where we're going to go in this. We need to have circumcised tongues. We've sort of touched on it before, but I'll let you go into the next issue you want to talk about.
Well, I want to go back to something you said, sensitivity, because, and I told you guys, you can get these outlines. We'll get them to you. It's easy to do. But on this outline, he's going through the cutting away of the flesh, the fatty tissue. And that's the first thing he mentioned is extreme sensitivity. That shined so much light for me when you said that, because how often do we interact with people, and how often do you find yourself just extremely sensitive, right? Certain subjects, right, bring out this person, right? No one knew this person exists, and then you hear this thing, and all of a sudden you're activated, and you're saying and you're behaving in a way that's gotten everybody's attention, right? And a lot of times after that, I know I've done this before. I'm overly sensitive about certain things, and so a subject will hit, and before then I'm really calm and I'm having a really good time, and then that thing hits. That's when I realize that's an area that I haven't dealt with, right? And I love the fact that this is a sign. It's a telltale sign. This sensitivity, this extreme sensitivity, is a telltale sign that there is some excess flesh there. I hope that bless you like it just blessed me, because that's something I think all of us need to begin to pay attention to. I think that's one of the reasons probably that I look so forward to Teshuvah. It's not that Teshuvah can't happen on a daily basis, but that time given to that, it's like there is specific emphasis placed on certain things in my life during this time. And I always say it's kind of weird that out of all the seasons, I actually love Teshuvah. It's a weird thing, but that's the time for Abba to do some specific work, some detailed work in my life. And he does that by exposing some of these things. And so every year, regardless of who we are or what we think about ourselves and our righteousness, every year we seem to accumulate flesh, like he said about the fingernails. And the sensitivity is a major telltale sign. So I'm asking everyone to pay attention to those telltale signs. And I mean, enter into prayer, release that thing to Abba, and surrender, and let him begin to work on that. This next one, though, is the lips. And if you get this outline, there are scriptures that are assigned to these particular areas. Is the lips. And he starts with Exodus 6 and 12, Shemot 6 and 12, Moshe, slow to speak, let your words be few, only speak that which the Father has given me to speak, not flesh reactive.
You know, one of the things about the flesh, the excess flesh issue that we're talking about in general, is the fact that the excess flesh is fatty tissue. If you understand anything about the human body and the way it's designed to work, then when we have toxins enter our body, we have the bad stuff come into our body, it goes and is stored up in the fat cells, the adipose tissue, the fatty tissues. And what that means is that it's there, and you don't even know it's there. You know, you just begin to swell up. Well, you know, when our lips begin to swell up, it's like they're poisonous. They got all this stuff in there waiting to be released. And when you start pressuring with heat or with exercise or with strenuous activity, stress, when you begin to put pressure on adipose tissue, it begins to release its toxins. This is when the toxins are in your mouth, in your lips, then you're just quick to speak. You're quick to throw it all out there. It's like you just hit a few of those cells and squirt it out. You know, I don't want to be gross with you here, but It's like you popped a big pimple, and it just everywhere. There's this pus pocket of toxins has come out. Now this is why the circumcision of the lips, is so important to us. Prophet Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, in the whole vision that he had in the temple, the train filled high and lifted up. The Isaiah 6. This whole passage is, he sees the glory of the Lord, and he speaks for it. And look, this guy his prophet was a priest, and he was actually a member of the royal household. He was better than a priest. He was, well, different than a priest. He was a member of the whole royal household, and he was a very powerful speaker and all this kind of good stuff, and a very influential person. But he sees the king high and lifted up, and his glory filling the temple, and he says, "Woe is me! Woe is me, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell amongst the people of unclean lips." Now, this is that problem. We have this uncleanness in our mouths, ready to explode in a moment, ready to pour out on people. And this is part of the process of, like I said earlier, we got nitroglycerin up there. We got bombs that create craters, man, if we're not careful with what we do with our mouths. And so as we look at the circumcision, okay, how can I surrender these lips and the vocal cords behind it, and the tongue that wags it, and the air even that I breathe, to the Father? Now, it all's tied back to the mind as well, and to the heart. So we got this issue when you talk about the circumcision of the lips, of surrendering them to him, to take out the excess flesh, to remove, to trim back, to peel away the layers, to release the toxins in a safe way to him, not to the world. When we're talking about doing that, it's going to be a deep cut, but a beautiful cut. He knows exactly how to go all the way down past the lip, past the tongue, past the vocal cords, past the lungs, into the heart, into the mind. It's almost like he's got these wires like they do in the surgeries or whatever, the tubes and the cameras, and he will go just enough to where he can make you a vessel of beauty and honor and joy and hope and love, and bring forth the kingdom's beauty. That's the whole idea. That's what the circumcision of the lips is. Well, I know we're going to run out of time here, so I wanted to touch enough about that to where you get a hunger for it and an appetite for it. God can make your lips a vessel of blessing and beauty to your families and to the cities which you visit, even the places you go alongside the road. Always look around and speak blessings. If you even think about it, say, "Oh, bless that land, bless that farm, bless those people in the car that are meeting me." Even if they cut you off in traffic, especially if they cut you off in traffic, whatever it may be that you deal with, we are designed to release the blessings of heaven upon the earth, and our lips need to be uncircumcised. The more we pour out blessings, the less likely we are to let a curse come out of our mouth. And I'm not just talking about profanity. I'm talking about negative speech, accusation, criticism, cynicism, sarcasm, all the negative things that we might say that might endanger or damage our relationships.
One of the things I was hearing when you were speaking about the lips was, I remember hearing this passage. Well, there a couple of passages came up. One was, "Put a watch over my mouth and keep the doors of my lips, that I might not sin against you." I heard that, and then the other I heard was it was dealing with the marriage, and he was talking about Shaul was talking about Christ's love for the church, and he talked about how he washes the church, with his words. And so that, to me, that means we have one or two things we can do. Right? We can either release this poison, right, and we can contaminate the area that really could have been sterile and could have been made prepared for people to be able to talk, and for people to be vulnerable even in your midst, and to where they feel it's okay to be vulnerable, and they feel that this is an atmosphere for healing, right? Or we can, we can release toxin, contaminate everything, and then people begin to lock up, walls come up, and people walk away with all of the hurt and the pain and the bitterness that they came into our presence with. I would pray and I would hope that we are a people that we're more geared to release this washing effect, to where people feel that they've been blessed, that they've been healed, that they at least they've started that process of being made whole, just because of the interaction with kingdom people, kingdom minded, kingdom type people. And I think as we go through, as we surrender to this circumcision, and as we surrender our ears and our lips and these other areas that we'll get into, that hopefully that's what's happening. People are starting to recognize that, you know what, that's me, because it's me. It's been me, and every year I go through the same process. So hopefully we're starting to recognize, you know what, when I interact with people this time, or the next time I have this opportunity, I want to be that person that they're talking about, that would release blessings, that would release this washing effect over the people's lives, where people, when they leave my presence, they feel a sense of they are refreshed, they're restored, rejuvenated. I remember sometimes when we would come into the services at the house, my family, we were going through so much at that time. We were dealing with poverty and the spirit of poverty, and just all and religion. There was just all type of things we were dealing with, and so it was a rough season for us, tough time. But I remember whenever we got there, we didn't think about those things. It's like those things didn't matter. Those times we were there, I remember seeing my wife laying out and being blessed, and seeing women around her speaking into her life, saying things for me. And I remember being given the responsibility of kind of sharing with the youth. And those were beautiful times. And you didn't think about how much poverty you were experiencing, in your life and things like that. And I want that to be the experience of people who are in my present, that I'm having to interact with. I don't want them to walk away reminded of how poor they are, and how horrible things could be. I want them to walk away with a sense of hope, refreshed, with a sense of joy, and a new energy to go back and face those things, right? But face them with the strength that they received and the encouragement that they received from those relationships.
If God can touch your heart and inspire you and encourage you in any context, then He can do it in every context. And so, with regard to the Creator, with regard to the King, He's looking for any point of access into our lives. The way we were able to work together and get together and raise our kids together, and the things that we did, that was a point of access. You were having some struggles. I mean, well, all of us having trouble. Yours were pretty intense at that particular stage, as I recall. And we knew it, but we couldn't fix all those problems. But what we could do is give the Holy One an access point where encouragement and inspiration could come into, and I knew, and you knew, that if He could inspire and encourage you in your difficult financial or family or religious context that you were in this process, then He could do anything. And I think it's one of the messages that we really want to say is God can do anything. That's why we don't have to complain. We don't have to be angry. We don't have to be offended. We don't have to bring up a nurse and keep rehashing old wounds and scars that we've got. It's not that they're not real. It's that God can do anything. And because He can do anything, all He needs is a point of access. And once it's like the explosion. He sends forth the ray, and it just spreads out everywhere, and it begins to touch every area of your life. And I see how far, your family has come. And I look at your kids have grown up, and you got, each one of them, from Brooks to Taylor to Tony, and the other girls, and they've all grown up, and they've all had troubles and struggles, but they've all come forth to be beautiful men and women of God. and not only, and now they're finding levels of like success, finding levels of influence and activity, and they changing the world. I mean, and bit by bit, day by day, they do. And mine are the same way. And it's not because we don't have issues or problems. It's because God's found an access point, and He's releasing that encouragement and inspiration, and He wants to do it in you, and He wants to do it in your families, and He wants to do it in the people you're going to see this weekend too.
So as we get ready to bring this to a close, this is exciting. This is the part I've been waiting to get to. I want to leave you with this. So a part of my assignment on my job, I came into the job with an assignment, and that initial assignment was to begin to help us to transform our systems to what they call a patient-centered medical home. And one of the primary functions of a patient-centered medical home is access. And so one of the primary responsibilities that I was given was to make sure that from clinic to clinic, we enhanced our access, broader access, right? So that patients who really needed those services could get in to see doctors and things like that. And what that does is it creates long-term healing relationships with their providers versus those hurried sporadic visits, and versus having to spend time in the ER and having to wait and all the things that go along with that process. So a part of this was to try to get those patients out of the ER to a primary care physician where they had long-term healing relationships. So we call those patient-centered medical homes. I believe that the kingdom of God, the people of God, should be should create broader access for people who are in need of Abba, in need of what He does. And every one of our homes, every one of our lives can be access points. And the more of us that are operating within that kingdom environment, the more access people have to Abba. They have access to what He is capable of doing, right? What He wants to do, what He loves to do, right? Not just the, in the charismatic service, we saw a lot of the healing and things like that, but it's not just that. That's a very small part of everything that He does. But He's a loving Father. He wants to be there as you're raising your children. He wants to be there when you're trying to learn how to communicate with your wife or the husband. He wants to be there when you're needing wisdom on your job and making the right decisions. And so all these things. And so as we undergo this circumcision type experience, we're becoming more and more involved in creating access points so that the love of Abba can flow through our lives and really reach those individuals that that he can reach.
Yeah.
Probably will close this out. I'll
close it in just a second. I just wanted to kind of add one thing about the issue of even comparing it to the medical field and the patient care issues is what we're, as opposed to building a network of medical care, we're building a kingdom culture. We're going to get more into kingdom culture as the time goes. Mm-hmm. But if that's what we're doing, then realize it's not just about, like in the medical field, we give you a drug and it fixes you, or at least it enables you to handle your symptoms. That is not the ideal process. The idea is to connect you with a support group and with as a portal of access to all the support you need and all the health you need. Well, the same thing in the kingdom, or the kingdom culture we're building, is say, I could pray for you and, hopefully maybe you'd fall down. Who knows what might happen here? But we could pray for your healing and you could even be healed, or we could pray for your deliverance and you might be delivered. But the issue is not just about getting that one event taking place. The issue, it's like a drug or an operation that's going to try to fix everything, but won't change your lifestyle. The kingdom culture is designed to change your lifestyle. These circumcisions that we're talking about, the circumcision of the ear, the circumcision of the lips that we visited about today in particular, are designed to change, enable you to fit into a kingdom culture that keeps nurturing, keeps encouraging, keeps inspiring, and keeps opening up the avenues and the doors of heaven over people's lives. Day by day, week by week, year by year, decade by decade. This is why we're here. Yes. This is what it's all about.
Yes. pray for our country and those who are affected by the things that we do, the decisions we make in this country. God bless you.